Coming to you fresh from session with Donald Trump Jr. right before his Republican National Convention speech. No, you don't look high. No, trust me, you're fine. I'm RJ Balde, and this is the TRICHOMES Hash podcast. On this show, we feature conversations about trending cannabis topics. We also bring in industry insiders and influencers to discuss their point of view. In this episode, I'll be talking to Michael Patterson about his work to normalize, legalize, and develop medicinal cannabis by engaging in commerce, marketing, regulatory reform, and product development. We'll also talk about his work to prepare the international cannabis market and more. Without further ado, let's hash it out. Today, I am joined by Michael Patterson, CEO of U.S. Cannabis Pharmaceutical Research and Development and editorial board member of the American Journal of Endocannabinoid Medicine. Welcome to the show, Michael. I'm stoked to have you here.
Thanks so much, RJ. Very happy to be here.
Yeah, right on. I understand you're in Florida right now, and it's like 90% humidity. And how are you doing with the weather and with everything going on? How, the state of the world? How are you doing today?
Well, in Florida, as you know, with specifically with COVID, we tried to be the best in the world, get as many cases as possible. And for a while, I think we were number one, but I think we're falling off the list. But it's okay now in the fact that I don't know if you saw the two hurricanes that were in the Gulf for a little while. Yep. They're not coming to us because now I'm on the east coast of Florida. And so with Dorian last year, that massive storm that just curved and missed us, I live about a block from the beach. So it's a great place to be, except during hurricane season. So as long as there's no hurricanes, I can sweat it out during the summer and I'm okay.
Okay, that's good. That's good. Yeah. Good to hear also about the hurricanes and that they're not heading in that direction. That is
not yet.
Definitely good news. Not
still
yet.
Got a couple more months left. Yeah, right.
Okay. I'm gonna knock on wood here. I don't know if you could hear that, but I'm knocking on wood for you guys. Now, we mentioned before we were recording here, we were chatting a little bit, that you previously to being in the cannabis industry had experience working in the nursing home space. Now, I understand you were COO of Avante Group for about 3 years, in which you managed 20 nursing home facilities with 2,500 employees in 4 states. How did you start in that business, and how does it differ from the cannabis industry?
That is a great question. So I'm a 26-year healthcare exec. I started as an occupational therapist. I went to school in university at East Carolina University in North Carolina, and you could probably tell by the accent. And then I moved to Florida right out of school because that's where the jobs are. If you're going to work with senior citizens, Florida is the Mecca. So came here and worked as a therapist. And then over the years, I started working for a nursing home chain, and I kind of evolved into going into their management. I ended up getting my nursing home administrator license in multiple states. And then that morphed into getting into the management role. And then before I took over as COO, 2 weeks prior to that, one of our executives was murdered because it's a long story, but he was addicted to cocaine and things. He just hung out with the wrong people, if you can imagine. So I took over that company at 32 years old, and we did, like I said, $230 million a year. But the main difference is it's the exact opposite of the cannabis industry because it's extremely regulated, and the regulation has been around for somewhat pretty much decades. So everybody who invests in it and everybody who's in it has pretty much understands the rules and the laws. And but a major difference is it's all government funded. So you live and die off government funding. And so some people like that. I typically hated it because the nursing home industry does not incentivize, in my opinion, anything new. They want to keep the status quo. They never want to change anything. People in the industry are very close-minded. The minute I found out that I made the transition into cannabis, I was pretty much blackballed or ostracized from anybody in the industry. That was back in 2013. So that was a long time ago. And so things are still being fleshed out. And So the major difference that I see with cannabis and something like nursing home or home health or pharmacy is the regulation and the rules are not concrete in cannabis. And that's what's limiting our growth as an industry, because investors
Mm-hmm.
and regulators want to see consistency, and they want to know, they want everything to be exact and regulated so they understand where the future is going to go. And so that's one of the reasons that I started US Cannabis, is because I saw the need for somebody who understands heavy regulation to come in and
Mm-hmm.
assist companies and assist businesses in getting this up and running. Because literally I can see the future in cannabis, because when you start a new industry, regulation only increases, it never decreases. So
Mm-hmm.
we look to attract people from the healthcare industry to come into cannabis, because I can easily tell them, say, look, I can teach you the day-to-days on cannabis. I can teach you terpenes. I can teach you the terminology. What I can't teach
Mm-hmm.
you is the ability to focus on and deal with the amount of stress of all these rules and regulations and know how to handle those.
Right.
The nursing home industry is one of the few industries where if you cause any harm to a patient, you can go to prison. And so, as a
Mm-hmm.
nursing home administrator, I was actually we had a investigation of one of our facilities, and I was the administrator at the time, and it was an allegation of abuse. Well, I was away from the building, and they called me and they said, "Hey, the police are here with social services, and they want to interview you." Because the rule in Florida is, if an allegation of abuse is substantiated, you can go to prison that day. It's like, don't pass
Oh,
go, don't collect your $200, you go to
damn.
prison. So luckily, this was a misunderstanding. It was no issue, but you
Mm-hmm.
constantly live with the stress of potentially going to prison. And so when I started
Wow.
into the cannabis space, I'm like, this is actually easier than the
Yeah.
nursing home space. So I'm used to the stress. I'm used to the federal government, because we would deal with a lot of audits with Medicare and Medicaid. We actually had an
Right.
audit before I came in to the company, where it was an FBI criminal probe that didn't go
Oh.
anywhere. But I was used to being interviewed by FBI. I was interviewed by the Attorney General of the state of Virginia on a case dealing with
Wow.
Medicaid and ventilators. So I'm used to an extreme amount of stress, and so I felt like I could really put that knowledge and that way of life, so to speak, into the cannabis space to really help bring it along. Because one of the things that our company, U.S. Cannabis, tries to do is we try to work on all the choke points of the industry: banking,
Mm-hmm.
international trade, regulation,
Mm-hmm.
compliance, research, and we really try to move those areas along, because for the industry to survive and to thrive, you really need to have that base of support across all these aspects to support the entire industry.
Mm-hmm. Certainly. Why? Why do you think it is that the nursing home industry is so reluctant to change or to updating what they're doing? Do you think it might have anything to do with just the state of the clientele? You know, usually older people are sometimes more reluctant to changing anything.
A lot of it is because there's no incentive.
Ah.
Financially, the way the industry works is Medicare and Medicaid pay the bill, and
Mm-hmm,
so
mm-hmm,
the nursing homes have to typically make their rules and regulations around those laws. And so until those laws change, until the reimbursement levels change, then you're not going to
mm-hmm,
see any major change. Now they're moving to a new system to where they're going to go off, instead of just paying you. For example, if I'm a nursing home patient and the therapists work with me, they used to pay you by how much time you spent with the patient, up to
mm-hmm,
about 2 hours a day was the max. So you could spend two
mm-hmm,
hours a day between physical, occupational, speech therapy. Now they're changing that to what they call outcomes. So rather than just spending time with the patient, you have to show the patient is getting better. And so that's good and bad. It's good in the fact that they're having outcomes, but the challenge is, if I'm dealing with somebody who's 82 years old and they have 13 different diagnoses and they just had a heart
right.
attack or they had a
Mm-hmm,
massive stroke, they're probably not going to get better for a long, long time. So there's
mm,
the biggest challenge that I see is that there's no, to me, financial incentive to do things differently. And typically, what I find is the ownership in the nursing home industry is ingrained into multiple groups that have been doing this now for probably 50 years. And so these
mm-hmm,
businesses are typically passed down through family members, or there's a big Orthodox Jewish contingent across the United States who own a lot of these facilities, as well as publicly traded companies. And so I think a
mm-hmm,
lot of it is, until they can get away from federal payments, convenience and make it more private pay induced, I think that's where you're going to start to see a lot more change. And then honestly, one of the major reasons is liability, because if you're not familiar,
Right.
nursing homes get sued all the time.
Yeah.
Every month I probably did over 100 depositions, being the
Damn.
COO of Avante Group.
Every
Yeah.
month?
So well, no, we
Wow.
had 8 cases pending every month, and so out of that
Oh, okay.
3 year period, I
Whew.
probably was deposed 100 times. Yeah, so you really
Jeez.
get used to you get used to patterns in lawsuits. You get used to risk. So I do a lot of compliance consulting. We're actually the corporate compliance directors for a group in Philadelphia called Restore Integrated Wellness. They have 6
Mm.
dispensaries there, and so we really
Hmm.
work off of what is happening now and what's coming down the pike. We try to get people ready for that, and we try to set them up
Right.
almost like a healthcare facility from day one. That way, they don't have to keep looking over their shoulder in the future.
Right. Right. Do you, I wonder if you feel at all, with nursing home facilities obviously being among the most heavily impacted by the pandemic, are you glad you got out of the space when you did?
Yes. Like somebody
Yeah.
asked me, I'll give you a perfect example. So last year I
Sure.
spoke in Orlando at the American Medical Marijuana Physicians Association National Conference.
Yeah, sure.
So
Uh-huh.
so since it's Florida, I knew some of the physicians from my previous life as a nursing home executive, and so one of the first things that was funny, I got up on stage, and one of the first things I said is, people who see me now and they say, "You smile all the time, Michael. You seem so happy, but when you were running those nursing homes, you were always just sad, and you were always so
Mm.
stressed out." And I'm like, well, I go from an industry where everybody hates you to an industry where everybody
Mm.
loves you. And everybody laughed.
Yeah,
So a
right.
lot of it is you're think about it, the cannabis executives, everybody's looking at them to it's in a different way of a different light. And so in the cannabis industry, I find is it's one of the challenging parts is everybody comes from a different point of view. And so, one of the
Mhm.
challenges we deal with consulting with larger companies and investors is that when you look to invest in a company, you need to look who the team is, and you need to
Mhm.
create a baseline of knowledge, so everybody can get on the same page and all move forward together.
Mhm. Got it. Yeah, and speaking of that, so some of the latest data from Headset, they're a company that is sort of plugged into the point of sale system in dispensaries throughout California and other regions as well. Um, their latest data shows that the silent generation is consuming cannabis more and more at an increasing rate. So, sort of tying those two together, as someone who has a lot of family with lifelong experience in nursing homes and healthcare and home care, I'm interested in hearing what you see are the differences in marketing to each member, or marketing to members of each generation. So, like, how is um, marketing or advocating for cannabis to millennials or even boomers different than older generations or members of the silent generation?
The number one thing is they can't handle the difference, and they can't handle the visual that cannabis gives. And let me give an example. So the older
Okay.
generation still have stigma and stereotypes about cannabis users. It's the hippie,
Mm.
the guy with the nose ring, the tattoos, the long hair, whatever. And so what I
Mm-hmm.
tell people is you have to assimilate into the corporate medical structure and the current way that boomers and senior citizens receive healthcare. So if you're going to go out and make a
Mm.
store that looks like a discotheque, then a lot of seniors are not going to come there. If you're not going to offer different
Sure.
services for seniors, and you're not going to have nurses and qualified healthcare people to work with those people, and if they don't feel comfortable, then they're probably not going to come to your facility. And let me give you a perfect example. So one of the places where my office is, there's a maintenance guy. His name's Bob. Not his real name, but just to let you know. So Bob is he's 72, and one day he's just asked. We're just talking up, and he asked me what I did, and I was explaining it to him, and he was telling me that he's on opiates, he's on Xanax, he's on antidepressants, he's on all this different stuff, and
Mm.
he really wanted to get into cannabis or try it, but he didn't know how. So I literally went and found him a doctor in Florida. The doctor sent over an email for the medical record. Well, he didn't even know how to open up an email. So I had to open the email up for him. I had to sit there and go through how all his symptoms, and I typed it into the computer. I sent it back to the physician, and then he went to his
Mm-hmm.
appointment last week. And so, in the way it works in the state of Florida is, once you go to the doctor, your name goes into the system in the state of in Tallahassee, and then within 2 weeks they send you an email which makes sure it gives you a patient number, and then you can go into a dispensary and shop. So the plan is when he gets his number, then I said I'll take you to the store and we'll go shopping together because I'm a medical patient. So that is literally the only way that he would actually go into the medical cannabis system, because there's a huge amount of fear of the unknown with senior citizens. As we all
Yeah.
know, seniors don't like a lot of change. And so if you're
Right.
going to address that market, you have to budget qualified people who are used to being in the healthcare space, and you have to budget the amount of time it's going to take to spend with each patient. Because typically, if I'm a millennial and I've been doing cannabis recreationally for 5 to 10 years, I come into the store, I know I want this dab at this percentage, and this vape pen and this and this and this. I don't have to ask a lot of questions. Well, senior citizens
Right.
don't know anything about anything. So a lot of times I tell people is you really have to understand that demographic. And then one of the big things I tell them is if you do your job at the beginning and spend that time with that patient, they will most likely never leave you. They will never go to a competitor,
Right.
because again, you built their trust and now they trust you and they don't want to have to go down that road again. So if you look at the long-term numbers, you're going to find that you can actually make more per patient because you're not fighting as much on cost, because the patient is too scared to even go somewhere else, even if it's cheaper.
Right. Yeah. I totally get that. And like even for someone who is, say, young but not as well versed, like going to a dispensary can be an intimidating experience. Like if you don't know much about, say, terminology or the different types of strains, even or even just like general knowledge of cannabis, going to a dispensary for a first time, if you don't find that bud tender that happens to be very welcoming and very informative and ready to give you that information, it can be a daunting experience to go to a dispensary for a first time. I know I experienced that when I first moved here to California. I did delivery for a long time because I was afraid to go into a dispensary and sort of almost maybe like expose my lack of knowledge about the subject.
Well, imagine you felt fearful, but imagine if you're 82 or you're
Right.
79.
Yeah.
And so this is
Totally.
what we see is that, for example, in Florida, we are currently raising funds to buy a medical marijuana license. There's a couple for sale, and our goal is to
Mm-hmm.
become the world's first senior citizen focused marijuana company. Really put in the
That's
time
dope.
and effort to really, because that's what I know, and so nobody can say, well, you
Mm-hmm.
don't know that business. No, I've done it for 25 years. So
Right.
I want to show the world that we can service this generation. We can help this generation, because the average senior citizen in the United States is on 13 prescription medications a day. And they're tired of it, RJ. They're so tired of it. They're tired of not going to the bathroom. For example, I used to work with
Yeah.
92-year-old women, and they weighed about 95 pounds sopping wet, and they couldn't eat. They
Ugh.
had no appetite.
Ugh.
And so if we had the cannabis in lower doses, and also another thing, the senior citizens, they don't want to get, quote, high. They just want to feel better. So the
Right.
younger generation's like,
Right.
how much do I need to take to get me messed up? And so that's more of a
Right.
recreational thing. So
Right.
you really have to say, okay, we need to start low. We always tell them start low and go slow, because we both
Exactly.
know if you have somebody that age who has a negative experience their first time with cannabis, they'll probably never use it again.
Yeah. Totally. Totally. And that speaks to the versatility of cannabis and what it is, that you
Mm-hmm.
can start low and go slow, and you can reap those medical benefits and those health benefits, but you can also market it to the younger people who are just looking for the high THC content to have a good time with their friends
Right.
and sesh with their friends.
And there's nothing
And
wrong with that. I think that's a great idea, because it's a lot safer than alcohol and other drugs. But I have to tell you a funny story.
yeah.
So, um, every time I talk to seniors, I don't know what it is, but they always tell me the time that they smoked a joint in 1973 with all their friends, and that's the last time they did it. Like, I don't know what it is, like a rite of passage. They're like,
Yeah.
well, I smoked one like 35 years ago, and so
Yeah.
but they're so curious about it, and even my personal experience. My father's 77, and it took him. He still lives in North Carolina. He's a military vet, MBA, and it took him 4 years to really understand why I was doing this. And now I
Wow.
have to tell you, he's done a 180. So he sent me an email. You'll find this funny. He sent me an email asking me to find him marijuana for his friend in North Carolina who has Parkinson's disease. And I said,
Yeah.
I had to call him on the phone. I said, Dad, you can't ask me to do something illegal over the internet. So,
Yeah, no
so
receipts,
I
man.
said,
We can't have the receipts for this.
right. It's still illegal in North Carolina. But again, he didn't know that. He didn't understand. And
Sure.
so again, that goes back to the rules and the clarity, because we all know cannabis is legal in 33 states in the US, but you have to read the fine print. Every state's a little bit different.
Yeah, that's so funny that he sent you the email.
I know.
Yeah. Were you able to help him out though in the end?
Well, I was able to find some people to help him out. I'll just put it that way. So we were able to take care of it. Yes.
Got you. Got you. Okay, that's good. That's good. At the end of the day, that's what's up. Now, I want to ask you about this too, because you are, like I mentioned during your intro, an editorial board member of AJEM. That's the world's first peer-reviewed printed medical journal exclusively about endocannabinoid science and medicine. How did you get started with them?
LinkedIn. I got to tell everybody,
LinkedIn.
if
That's the
you don't
key.
follow
That's the
LinkedIn,
key.
if you don't get on LinkedIn, you are missing out, because I would say probably
Yeah,
80 to 90% of my referrals happen through LinkedIn. So I was contacted by the publisher
that's
about 2
dope.
years ago, a guy named Kenny Watkins, great guy. He's out of New Jersey, and he had 30 years of publishing experience with pharmaceutical companies. And so he contacted
Mm.
me about this idea and that how he wanted to start, and how he wanted to do this journal. And because he had the pharmaceutical background, so I was brought in, and my role in AGEM is to primarily help the publisher. I'm not a researcher by trade, but my
Mm-hmm.
job is to kind of normalize and explain the cannabis space from somebody who has a
Mm-hmm.
healthcare background, who does. I used to run pharmacy, so I do know somewhat of the pharmaceutical industry. I'm not saying I'm an expert in it, but we came
Sure.
in and helping him, and so building up that the journal advisory board, through, we have a legal team, a guy named Rod Kite out of Asheville. He has a law firm, Kite on Cannabis. He's been doing cannabis law now for about 6 years, and bringing in more people to get more exposure. I remember our first issue, we had a launch conference. It was actually in Manhattan at Columbia University. It was last November 2019. And so I put
Mm-hmm.
on LinkedIn, I had a short little 1 minute video flipping through the actual journal, and it had over 15,000 views on LinkedIn. That's a lot.
Wow.
So I
Yeah.
found that we hit a nerve. And so we started in the fact of we wanted the best of the best. And our editor in chief, his name's Dr. Jahan Marku, and he's been
Mm-hmm.
doing cannabis research. He's a PhD for probably almost a decade. And so what we found was we wanted to create that professional journal to reach the physicians who have been resistant to cannabis, to cannabis science. Because what we find
Mm-hmm.
is typically physicians who are over 45 years old, most of them don't believe in cannabis. Physicians under
Mm-hmm.
45 primarily are open to know about that. And so the journal is a start, and then we've gone on to create, Kenny and his team have gone on to create AGEM University. So this is an area where physicians can get certified medical education, or CME credits, and it's been approved through the New Jersey Board of Medicine, which is now, I think that's the first one. I think it's approved now by 15 states, for physicians, nurse practitioners, nurses to receive a continuous medical education. And now we're in negotiations with groups all over the world to do the exact same thing. And so one thing that maybe Americans don't understand is we need to lead the world in cannabis research,
Mm-hmm.
education, and operations. And so we've been limited
Mm-hmm.
due to federal law by doing that. But our goal is to transcend through technology to really bring that knowledge to the world. Because for people who don't know, 90% of all legal cannabis sales are in the United States, even though it's illegal at the federal level.
Oh, 90%? Is that what you said?
90%.
90%. Wow.
Canada's 5%, and the rest of the world is only 5%.
Huh.
Last year, Europe did 250 million in total sales in medical cannabis because recreational doesn't exist yet there, and we did, I think,
Sure.
13.2 billion in the United States.
Damn.
Right.
And that's with it still being federally illegal.
Right. Right. Is with it being
Wow.
federally illegal. So now with hemp being legal at the federal level, the challenges that we're seeing is, and we do a lot with a lot of high level things, talking to state governments. We actually help the state of Oklahoma write their cannabis law. We work with the Florida Commissioner of Agriculture on their hemp program here. Our operation in Africa, we'll probably talk about later. We shipped cannabis oil, CBD oil from Florida to Africa to demonstrate the proof of concept of shipping internationally. So the United States really needs to take its position in the world in the hemp and cannabis space. And that's one of the things that we're attempting to do to open up not just the world's eyes, but open up Americans and American businesses to operations overseas and opportunities over there.
Definitely. Now, what are your thoughts about those who advocate for cannabis as a treatment to COVID-19? There are, some articles out there, some sort of, there's evidence out there that some people are suggesting that it might help. What do you think about that?
I think if the research supports it, let's do it. I know one of our directors of research for Europe, he lives in Italy, and he told me there's a study going on right now with THCA, combining it with, I believe it's antibiotics to help with the treatment of COVID patients. And they said that study has not been released yet, but they said the early signs are showing that it's extremely positive. So cannabis being a natural anti-inflammatory, also being somewhat of an antibiotic, I think there's a lot of meat on that bone, so to speak, about this plant. We haven't been able to research this really and truly at the federal level. So most of that research has had to come out of Israel. We're starting to see some of that research come out of Europe and Canada, but I think we're going to see more advancements in science through the study of the cannabis and hemp plants in the next 5 to 10 years than we pretty much have seen in many markets over the last 20, because there's so much about this plant that we don't know. All the cannabinoids, the percentages, the formulations that are going to work for these different diagnoses. The challenge is, from a regulatory structure, is you got to find a pathway for big pharma, but you still have to keep a pathway for the local dispensary and the local producers and processors, because if you take them out of the game and only make it big pharma, you're going to have a war on your hands, not a gun war, but a culture war, and that's not something that we need. And so we advocate to as many politicians as we can, is you have to build in multiple lanes for people to operate, because if you don't, then the system will not work.
Are they responsive to that?
It's a great question.
That feedback, because big pharma historically isn't really too receptive to that sort of thing.
Well, the short answer to that is no. Most politicians are not receptive, and so what we typically do is we have to come to them and say, this is why you need to be receptive and how it's going to benefit you as a politician. Then once we do that, then they're willing to listen. So, and a lot of it is just persistence. Every politician I've ever talked to, hardly any of them know anything about cannabis. And then I talked to a U.S. congressman, and he did not know the difference between hemp and cannabis, and he was going to vote on the hemp law, and he didn't know the difference. So this is the situation that we're dealing with, and now we're talking about, if Biden wins, and they're talking about what they're going to do with cannabis and so forth and so on, and we're trying to do whatever we can to let the Biden campaign know, if they're listening, is that there's a way to do this. And so everybody out there who's listening, who's really for cannabis legalization at the federal level, in my opinion, in dealing with a lot of legislation and regulation for many, many years, is you can't just sit there and turn around and say, hey, this is illegal today, go. because this is kind of what
Right.
happened with hemp. And look what's happened. We still don't have ruling on the FDA. And so what we recommend is a roadmap to legalization, to where we develop committees to discuss this. We get input from all the states, because remember, 33 states are doing this 33 different ways. And so we really need to have
Mm.
input around the entire US, to have regular people like you and me and anybody who's interested to have a what I call as a listening tour, to really talk to people, to
Yeah.
really see what they want in this plan, because then that report should go to Congress. Congress should turn it into law, and then what we should do is have a phase-in period to where it goes into effect in, say, 12 to 18 months. And that's why,
Hmm.
if you look at Canada, that's what they did. So the financial markets, the legal markets, the patients, everybody knew when that date would start. I think it was October 1st,
Hmm.
2018. And then you had the
Hmm.
edibles that came in last year. So we need to be able to, at the federal level, we have to train all the federal employees on what this is and what this isn't. We have to train all the border patrol people about importing and exporting, because what people don't remember is that once this is legal here, everybody's like, oh, we're going to make so much money. Well, remember, now you open yourself up to competition around the world to bring in product a
Right.
lot cheaper than you can make it. And this is what we're seeing with hemp. We're seeing this to
Right.
where people can grow hemp for, probably less than 5 cents a gram, or maybe 1 cent a gram. I'm seeing prices in coming out of Colombia for like $5 for $5 a pound. For hemp,
Ah,
it's just
what?
so cheap. Yeah, it's just so unbelievably
Wow.
cheap. So to me, as America, we need to focus on the R&D. There's so much R&D that needs to be
Yeah,
done, and that's what we're good at. We're good at creating the research and
totally.
development, creating the systems, and then production can go other places around the world, but we're still going to need a lot of production here. But the opportunities for US based businesses around the world is just staggering, because for give you an example, I speak
Mhm.
around the world at conferences pre-COVID, of course. And my last conference I went to was March of this year in Ireland. It was the first ever medical cannabis conference, and there was probably about 300 people there. And Ireland's a small country; it's only 4 million people.
Wow.
But out of all the people who
Sure.
attended, there were two Americans, myself and Rod Kite was the attorney I told you about, who I brought over. Other than that, there were no Americans. And I'm thinking, well,
Hmm.
we have 90% of the global business, and there's no Americans representing here. And so I'm very bullish on bringing Americans and having American influence overseas, because we can move things along a lot faster. We've made a lot of mistakes
Right.
here, and so we need to help these other countries who've never done this, to really move forward and not make the same mistakes we did.
Certainly. Yeah, and that would definitely help everyone's bottom line, I feel
Right.
like. Now, you've been the CEO of US Cannabis Pharmaceutical R&D for the past 6 years, is that right?
Correct. We started in
Oh,
2014. Started in 2014, so yeah,
got
a
you,
little
got you.
over 6 years.
Yeah, almost 7 now.
Yep.
Now, the company's mission is to, quote, move society forward through legalized cannabis. So, can
Exactly.
you tell me more about the services specifically that US Cannabis offers, and does what does the society look like for your end goal? What would you like to see?
What I'd like to see is cannabis be treated as any other medicine around the planet. We're heavily focused on the medicinal side. I've got nothing against the recreational side. I think it's a great business.
Sure.
But based on
Sure.
my background, I'm going to try to stay in my lane, so to speak, and focus on what I know.
Mm-hmm.
And so our
Mm-hmm.
goal is, when we say move society forward, we feel that a cannabis in a society that's open and free, is people will get along a lot better. If people get along a lot
Mm-hmm.
better, we'll learn to work with each other, and then that will be able to affect a lot of things in a positive way. For example, if we feel better medically and emotionally, then we're able to interact with each other better. I think one of our problems in our society right now is people don't have the respect for each other, and they don't know how to
Mm-hmm.
interact with each other and get things done. And so I feel, from a societal level, not just in the United States, but across the planet, if we can start decreasing the amount of alcohol and all these heavy drugs that we're taking, and substitute in a positive way for more benefit with cannabis, hemp-based products, CBD-based products, we feel that it could literally be a change for all of society. And so we feel as if we can create the regulatory structure and facilitate the infrastructure for the business of cannabis, then that's where our focus is. And so I tell a lot of people, we focus on the choke points of the industry: banking, rules, laws, investment,
Yeah.
research, things like that, to where if we can help move those things along, then the producers and the growers and the sellers, they can have an industry where they can grow and they can and they can then be successful. And so that's what our goal is being able to not just fix it for ourselves, but fix it for the United States and the world as best we can. And a lot of times what we've had to do is we've had to go out and be the leaders. For example, U.S. Cannabis, we're joint venture partners with a company in Africa called MGMC Pharma. And our goal there is to create EU good manufacturing practice medication that we can sell all over the world. We're currently selling into Australia, and we're getting ready to sell into Europe. But our long-term plan, we recognize the industry around the world is moving to segmentation. And so segmentation, meaning in the US, a lot of people have to do everything themselves. They have to grow the product, they have to process it, and they have to sell it. California, you guys have a horizontal market where you can have your own grow, you can have your own dispensary or processing plant. But in the East Coast, a lot of these are what we call vertical integration. But globally, what you're finding is you're finding specialization. You're finding companies that grow, companies that process, companies that sell, and then companies that distribute. So what we want to become is we want to become what I call is the OPEC of the cannabis oil and cannabis flower. We want to be able to produce so much product that we drive the price down to a respectable level, I guess you'd say, because internationally the prices are sky high. To give you an idea, they're selling THC oil by the kilo for somewhere between 20 and 30,000 US dollars each. So it's extremely expensive. Yeah. And the problem is it's high price. Ooh. Right. Now, everybody's like, oh, that's great. Well, those prices aren't going to stay. So this is where the Canopy Growths of the world, all the major companies, the Tilrays of the world, they base their revenues off these sky high margins because they felt that pricing was going to stay. And so we are building our model there to be able to hit a lot lower pricing, to where our whole goal is we have to get the amount of volume of oil out, primarily oil, sunflower, but primarily oil, so companies can research it and turn it into products. Because the wave of the future is, whether you like it or not, pharmaceutical companies are getting into this business. Well, once they get into the business, they don't need the flower. They just need the base oil, and then they can make whatever they want. And so that's what our goal is to really help with that production. And then from a social equity aspect, our long-term goal is to pay farmers in Africa to grow on their organic lands, because these are pristine lands that they have, buy it from them, convert that into raw crude or distillate or isolate, and then be able to sell that on the global market. So everybody on the value chain benefits. And so that's what we feel like we have to lead by example to kind of show the planet how to move it forward. And one of the very ironic things is our facility is in a country called Lesotho, our primary facility. And for those of you may not know where Lesotho is, it's a little country that's inside of South Africa. It's landlocked.
Yeah.
And so our facility there, it was actually built and originally owned by Canopy Growth, which is out of Canada, which is actually the largest company on the planet. Well, Canopy pulled out of Africa in April of this year, and they pulled out of Latin America. So we were able to come in and have that facility, to be able to lease that facility for a multi-year deal. So we're working in a facility that's a high quality North American style facility that has all the requirements for compliance for exporting internationally. So it's exciting for me because we're bringing the high level of cannabis cultivation and science down into the lower level of in Africa. And then we're also moving into one of the companies that we work with is out of Australia called Parcel, which is PARSL. And they've developed a blockchain seed to sell technology to track patients and to track product and so forth and so on. So we will be implementing that there because they built their entire software off international trade. And ironically, the U.S. software makers have not done that because there's never been a need. But for us, we are not based in the United States yet. We're only in Africa and exporting around the world, where our long-term goal is we want to provide as much oil as we can. So when the United States legalizes, I can park a super tanker off the coast, theoretically, of Florida, and then be able to supply oil for all these processors around the country. Because when the United States goes legal, there's no amount of domestic production that we can make that's going to satiate, that's going to meet the demand. because typically
Right.
what you find in California, look at California, you guys average about 10 to 12% of your population uses cannabis on a monthly basis, whether it be rec or medical.
Mm-hmm.
So what's that? That's 4 million people. So in the United States, we have
Mm-hmm.
what, 330 million people. So overnight, you're going to go to
Mm-hmm.
probably 10% usage, which is 35 to 40 million people. Where right now, probably nationally, you probably have maybe 10 or 12 million users. So you're going to have to ramp up production dramatically. And so what we see is flower in the United States will be used for smoking, but we can't use flower to make the oil as well. There's just not going to be enough. So if we can come in and
Right.
assist and bring in this oil to keep these processors busy, we have to keep the price down when we go legal, because if the price goes too high, then the black market's going to thrive. And the whole point of going legal
Right.
is to make it into a situation to where we can get the tax money. I mean, you guys are going through that tremendously. I've seen reports in California where 80% of all legal sales are illegal.
Yep.
I mean, excuse me, 80% of all sales are illegal and
Well, yeah.
20% are legal.
Right.
Yeah. So
Exactly.
it's hard. And
Yeah.
so I see that. And so we're planning out to say the whole United States is going to be like that. So let's start planning ahead now, because again, I'm US born and bred. I love the United States. I want to make sure that we have a system that works for everybody, because that tax revenue is going to go help all these social programs. It's going to help all the different things that we want in society to do. And if we're not collecting that tax money, then that's going to be a major problem. And that's one of the things we want to fix.
There are so many, like you said, there are so many bottlenecks. There are so many obstacles that are still ever present in the cannabis industry, which is a relatively new industry, still very volatile. Now, I understand that you also have the one facility from Canopy in, I forget how to pronounce the country's name. Lithosos?
It's spelled Lesotho, Lesotho, but
Lesotho?
you
Yeah.
pronounce it Lesotho.
Lesotho. Oh, okay. Got
Yeah.
you. Got you. Cool. And now, is that just one of your licenses? Do you have any more?
We have 6 total. So
Six
that is
total.
our.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
So we're in 5 other countries in Africa, but what we're doing is we're doing our proof of concept now to show everybody this is how it
Okay.
works. And so once we
Got
do
it.
that, we will be in a better position to go out and raise funds. Right now, we're privately funded. We haven't gone out to the public to raise money, because we know in the global markets. Look at Canopy. Look at Aurora. Look at Tilray. These guys are in massive debt.
Mm.
They went out, they raised all this money, and then they spent it all. So for us, we
Yep.
wanted to do the exact opposite. We wanted to come out there and we wanted to show everybody, look, we're selling right away. We have all the certifications. We're already in the global markets. So now we have a revenue stream, and we've kept our costs extremely low. So we've set our entire system up for the future of cannabis, which we feel is going to be just like any other commodity. So if you can set your whole
Mhm.
business up to have a very low cost of operation, then we feel we'll be able to be very, very successful as these prices decline, as the volumes increase.
Right. Yeah. And it's certainly better to lay down that foundation now, as opposed to, like you said, how it turned out with hemp legalization, where the U.S. is still very much, for lack of a better term, still trying to figure its shit out. You know what I mean?
It's a mess. It's a mess. Right.
It's a mess. Yeah. Yeah. It is. That's a great way to describe it. Nice and simple. It's a damn mess. And
right.
so the work that you're doing to clean it all up and to, provide opportunity and regulation is so important for the sustainability of the industry, and to make sure that the products are safe, medical patients are taken care of, and they have access and education and knowledge as to these resources that they have available to them. Now, I was given in my notes here before the show that I understand you're currently working on a large project in Florida, which you say will become the Silicon Valley of hemp and cannabis research. Now, what do you mean by that?
So one of the things that going around the world, and I've been lucky enough to do that with cannabis, is there's a big need to coordinate all this research and development, because what I find is all these companies around the world are working in silos, and specifically in the States.
Sure.
I mean, think about it. Our whole system's set up in silos. Every state is a silo. Nobody can cross state lines with anything. So And so our goal is
Right.
what we've have a there's a 3 county area in Florida. It's on the central east coast of Florida. It's where Cape Canaveral, that county is called Brevard County, where they shoot the rockets off and
Oh,
so forth and so on, down
sure.
to a place called Fort Pierce, which is St. Lucie County. And so our goal is to create a what we call as a STAR zone, STAR, and that stands for Space and Treasure Coast Agricultural Research Zone. So we want to create what I call is the field of dreams effect. If you build it, they will come. And what we want to do is to create a regulatory structure and an incentive structure for companies to move there to place or to do research and development on cannabis and hemp, and not just the plant. We're talking about the digital cryptocurrency markets. We're talking about investment markets. We're talking about regulatory markets, because we need everybody in a central location, just like you have in Silicon Valley, to move this innovation forward. And one of the things we're really bullish on is the hemp plant and the industrial hemp side. So with the government and now that hemp is legal, they're doing a lot of grant money. And so our project and our idea is to bring this STAR zone together to where there's an industrial park. It's called the Treasure Coast Industrial Park. It's based in Fort Pierce, Florida, and it's a 1,000-acre research park. And they currently have the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which already oversees hemp, and you have the University of Florida Agriculture School, which is one of their schools, which is currently there. And then there's 800 acres of open land. So what we want to do is we want to bring in businesses to be able to use research grant money for their funding to come in and start doing research there to work with each other. And so the concept is, if you have an idea that you want to come to fruition, then you have somebody there who can, for example, make your hemp. You have somebody there who has the ability to turn it into a fabric if you want to do a fabric. And then you have somebody there, once you've figured out your material, if you want to make clothing, you have a processor or a producer that could produce that at massive levels. And then where we are in Florida is it's hooked into the rail system. So you can take rail cars with your products all the way to the port, which is Port Canaveral, which is in the middle of the state, all the way down to Miami or Jacksonville. So we feel that if we can incentivize companies to come to Florida to learn, and not just United States companies, we want to bring over companies from overseas, because a lot of companies in cannabis want to be in the U.S. They're just terrified of the U.S. because of our laws, and they don't know what the laws are. So we partnered with the Florida Hemp Council here in Florida to really bring in help with our political support, because we've been working on this for 3.5 years. And so you can imagine talking to politicians about creating the largest cannabis research zone on the planet. A lot of people stare at you with this look like, are you crazy? But we feel it's the future because somebody's going to do it. Some country's going to do it. Right now, Israel is trying to do it, but Israel's just not big enough. We need to use our might as America and use these federal grants to be able to study this, to bring in innovation into, to stimulate innovation in America. And I want people to look at, this is not a research place in Florida. This is America's research program. And that's kind of how we want to factor it, because America needs to lead. And so we want to be able to do that at a unified level. Now, it's a grand goal. It's a large goal, but you know what? If it was easy, everybody would do it. And so our focus is we have to keep pushing through, and we have to be preaching to the choir and preaching to people that this is the future and research is the future. And I tell the locals, I said, do you want to have the best paying, highest profile jobs like a Research Triangle Park in Raleigh-Durham? If you're not familiar with Research Triangle Park, we used it as a model for our park, in the fact that it was started in the late 60s, early 70s through a public-private partnership between the state of North Carolina, University of North Carolina State, and Duke University. And they tried to figure out a way to monetize their brain power. So what they came up with was a donation by the state of North Carolina for 500 acres, and they created this research park, which is called Research Triangle Park now. And their first tenant was the U.S. government, who did biotech research back in the 70s. Well, this area of the United States now has the most PhDs per capita of anywhere in the United States, and they generate billions in total revenue and millions in taxes for the state every year. And so we look at this as a win-win for our state. We increase economic development, we increase quality of life, and we bring in high quality jobs into this area. And we also, the biggest thing is we put the U.S. back on the map as an innovator, and that's where we need to be.
Definitely. I mean, if 90% of the sales are coming from this country, we certainly don't want to be left behind once legalization happens. Now,
So,
talk about embarrassing. that would
right,
be, that would be,
exactly.
yeah, that would be awful to hear. Now, you're basing your, you have this project in development in Florida, and medical cannabis, as we know, is legal in Florida. However, it is still illegal recreationally to possess 20 grams or less of cannabis, and the state is known for having still some of the harshest recreational cannabis laws. I know you're focused mostly on medical for now, but what are, if any, logistical situations or obstacles you've run into while working in the state and or working with the state? Has there been any complications at all?
Not so far, no, because a lot of things that we're doing
Okay,
here, we're not touching the plant yet here in the state of Florida. So a lot of this is
got it.
conceptual. We'll go to the politicians and say this is kind of what it is. A lot of what and then what we do is a lot of education. We actually get called in from county commissioners, people that we've reached out to over the years who would never call us back, and all of a sudden 3 years later they said, "Oh, I have your number here from a long time ago. Can you help us?" I went and
Yeah.
spoke to my local county commission about allowing dispensaries. So the way it works in Florida is municipalities and cities can ban dispensaries, but if they allow them, they cannot limit the number of dispensaries, and they cannot limit. They have to follow the same zoning regulations as a regular pharmacy, like a Walgreens or a CVS. So my county had
Mhm.
banned them, and I spoke in favor of them. And so luckily, after I talked and so other people talked, we won 5-0, and now we have dispensaries in that area because a lot of it was we have to break down this complicated topic of full of ideology from that's been negative for 90 years into basic facts. And so the facts are this plant is all natural. The fact that this plant has never killed anybody in human history, and the fact that
Mhm.
it really makes a difference in people's lives. And so what I've noticed here, I got to tell you, since I've been living here for so long, is now that cannabis has been legal medically here for since 2015, 16, around there,
Mhm.
nobody seems to
Mhm.
care anymore. So the reason
Oh,
that,
wow.
like, that's a big deal because when it first came out,
Yeah.
you had everybody say the world's going to end, the sky's going to fall if this dispensary goes in. Well, now
Of
research is
course.
showing that, right, exactly. So research is showing that the property values actually go up when the cannabis dispensary is around, and crime goes down because there's no incentive to rob somebody. You just go to the store and buy what you need. So that
Mhm.
has helped.
Mhm.
And what I find is it's really helped because people like me and others have gone around the state to educate people, and also I got to say, state of Florida has gotten a lot of flack on their system. They're a very limited system. I mean, you have probably I think 8,000 licensed businesses in California for cannabis. We only have
Mm.
22. So we kept it
Hmm. Wow.
extremely limited. But one of the positives of
Yeah.
that is we have very good public safety. There hasn't been any or very very few dispensaries or cultivation areas that have been robbed or had any crime problems. There hasn't been any major issues in society dealing with these dispensaries. I mean, now you get to the point where nobody even knows they're in their neighborhood. And I find that as a huge win and success because the whole adage here, this is a very conservative state. They said the sky was going to fall, the world was going to end, all the kids will be addicted to cannabis, and none of those things happened. So I think it's a
Mm.
wonderful a state to show, hey, all your worries and all your fear mongering, none of it worked. And so that's why we're coming up
Mhm.
for a vote in
Mhm.
2022 for recreational cannabis, and that's why I think it's going to pass, is because the state's now ready. Now, it's a little difficult here because we have to hit a 60% margin of voting for a constitutional amendment. So it's not like you just have to hit 50.1%. So you really have to get the public
Right.
behind you. So that's why I feel 2022 is going to be the year because most people realize it's now legal in 11 states. And what I find now is the conversation is moving from not a religious but a moral and ethical issue to a money to a dollars
Ah,
and
I
cents
see.
issue. So it's exciting because I
Right.
go out there and say, you know what, this is a jobs grab now. Where are you going to go? And this is eventually going to go legal federally. So are you going to not allow this to where people can export billions of dollars of cannabis all over the world from Florida? Or are you going to let some other state like
Mhm.
California do that? And that's where I try to get
Mhm.
politicians thinking is that you need to think 5 years ahead of time. You need to think about your jobs and your constituents that are going to be there. And it's not a stretch for a politician anymore because 93% of all Americans, based on a Quinnipiac poll from 2019, states that they want medical cannabis legal. So let's
Mm-hmm.
start with the medical,
Mm-hmm.
like we did here. You guys went, you were the first out there. You had to teach everybody the trials and tribulations of cannabis in general. But we're learning on the East Coast is that, you know what, the world isn't going to end. And you know what, things can be better if it's done the right way. And so is it perfect? Absolutely
Right.
not. And we're going to have to keep evolving in the rules and laws. But I feel like we've done a good job here in the fact that we've kept public safety strong. And I think that's how we're going to keep moving forward because there hasn't really been a lot of negative outcomes.
Well, that's good to hear, man. Like, and you know, like, yeah, like you said, the proof is in the bottom line. Like, no one, the sky is still in the sky. Um,
Right.
the youth in Florida aren't all hooked on cannabis. You know what I mean? And the proof is showing itself every day. And it's great to hear that you emphasize the importance of continuing to do this work and continuing to evolve and adapt with the market and with the industry, which, if we go back to the beginning of our conversation, is the exact opposite of the space that you were in before with
Right.
nursing home facilities, which is a very, like you said, rigid structure, very established and non-changing structure. So that's great that you're able to sort of shift that mentality into where you are now and remember the importance of continuing to evolve and adapt, which is obviously so important for sustainability.
It is, and one of the big things that we do, we haven't touched on yet, is we do a ton of consulting for investment. So I do a ton
Mm-hmm.
of calls, and my staff do a ton of calls of people who want to invest in the industry. And so we look at it as if we can help people make money, then we're realists, and that's going to help move our mission forward, if that makes sense. So the
Yeah.
more
Oh,
people who
totally.
make money, the more the laws change and the more things get better. And so we always look at it as we don't look at companies as being competitors in whatever market they're in. We look at that if they're successful, then they're going to push their laws and their rules, which is going to push everybody's rules forward and really making sure we're kind of paying it forward type of thing. Because we feel like we need a lot of people to be successful. I kind of work off the what I call the Ocean's 11 effect, like the movies, to where we want to have a bunch of great people doing a lot of great things because this is something that one group can't do by themselves. We want as many groups as we can to kind of come together and help move this forward. And so one of the things that we try to do over the years is partner with companies that we know we're going to need down the road, whether it be cryptocurrency, something that we're working on right now, whether it be banking, whether it be blockchain seed to sale, whether it be government
Mm-hmm.
relations. We need to make sure these companies can be successful because as we grow, we're going to need their services because I don't want to do it all. I want to be able to take a day off here and there, So I need that's a
Yeah,
lot of these things.
totally.
I don't know banking that well, I don't know digital
Mm-hmm.
currency that well, and so I want to partner with companies who are like minded. And our goal is to kind of make sure they can kind of see things from the cannabis side, so they don't make the same mistakes all these other companies have made.
Totally. Yeah. It's all about growing together. It's all about that community, which I think is, all of the conversations that I've had with people in the cannabis industry, you know, it, at some point in our conversation, it always comes back to the community of the cannabis industry and helping each other come up and helping each other grow and be successful and look out for the clientele, look out for the patients, make sure that they're properly educated. And that more than any other industry, I think is what sets the cannabis industry apart and will really play a long role in, or a big role in the longevity of the industry.
I agree with you, but one of the things we have to
Yeah.
get rid of as an industry is to stop stereotyping people. Okay, because let me give you a perfect example.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
So if you ever saw
Mm-hmm.
me, I look like a classic white guy who dresses very conservative, and I don't do that intentionally. But for years, I lived. I'll just put it this way: I lived in a state where cannabis was illegal. I'll just put it that way. So I
Mm-hmm.
didn't fit the profile. If I was a policeman looking at me, I didn't fit the profile of somebody that they would search. So I used that
Right.
to my benefit. So I was using the stereotype to my benefit. So if I was using cannabis in an illegal fashion, then I was less likely to be stopped. And so last year I had an experience where I went to Barcelona and I was part of the judging committee of the first ever World CBD Awards. It was an international competition where
Wow.
people had to submit product and it was graded on a certificate of analysis basis as well as other objective factors. And there was a team of about
Nice.
15 of us who came over to get it up and running. And it was the first time in my life I've ever been discriminated against because I did not have a tattoo.
Oh, wow. Really?
Right. So
A little
everybody
too
looked at
clean cut
me.
for the panel, huh?
Let me tell you, I was quote the man, and I was everything that was bad in the
Wow.
industry. And I'm like,
Gee.
I'm just a guy from the South. I don't know what you're talking about. And I'm pushing the car,
Right.
the horse, the pushing the car or whatever the same way you are. And so what I tried to let everybody know is that we need to get rid of our stereotypes. Just because somebody looks like a professional doesn't mean they don't love cannabis and they're committed to cannabis. Just like somebody has
Totally.
green hair and nose rings doesn't mean that they're not professional. And so what I see in the
Absolutely.
industry here and globally is cannabis is coming into what I call cannabis 2.0. And we're coming to where the point where the professionals have to come in for us to keep pushing forward. And a lot of people don't want to hear that, specifically in California, because you guys have been doing things your own way for so long. But what we're going to start to see as legalization comes through is those state borders are going to go down. And so you're going to have to
Yep.
understand how you're going to work and compete with companies all over the country, because these false narratives or these false economies of these states where they're charging $20 a gram because there's no competition in a small state, all that goes out the window. So you really need to start
Uh-huh.
understanding the dynamics of this. And that's why we need to keep bringing in really smart people into this industry. And so a lot of people reach out to me on LinkedIn from all these different industries, whether it be life insurance or security or digital or anything. And they like, I want to know how to get into cannabis. And so I try to take as much time as I can with those people, because my whole thought is these people eventually could be rock stars in this industry. And if I help them now and they pay it forward, when I need something, they're going to take my call.
Yeah, totally. No doubt. And yeah, like that work that you're doing to sort of to break down those stereotypes and to also bring in people who are interested in getting into the industry and really just need someone to show them around, show them around, show them the ropes, show them what needs to be fixed and what is still evolving and what is still, in the works. It's great that you act as that facilitator rather than a gatekeeper, which I think, like you sort of mentioned, can sort of exist also in the cannabis community, is that like there are a lot of gatekeepers, they're like, they want to take ownership of cannabis, whether it be the plant or whether it be, their business or the industry. And that's, in my opinion, less helpful than anything else, because like you said, in order to fully form this cannabis industry, we do need those professionals to come in with their insights and help make sure that everything is up to snuff and the regulations are in place and these companies know how to navigate, a newly legal system once that does happen. So, so I think the work that you're doing is really great and certainly necessary, and it's better to do it now while we're still figuring things out than have to worry about it in hindsight.
Well, and I agree with you. And one of the big things I see is people in the cannabis space. I don't think they think far enough ahead. And in my mind, I don't know why. Like,
Mm,
this is what I was meant to do. All the stuff that I've done in
mm,
healthcare, I feel like this is, when people say you need to find your why, well, this is my why. This is what I've
mm-hmm,
been put on the planet to do. And I always look at it as all these people I help, I'm gonna, I hope to be a big shot, I guess you'd say, in the industry, to where I can motivate others and bring them into the fold. And I feel like I have to grow as a person, and I have to bring as many people as I can along, because in the future, people are going to want to work for people who they feel that are inspiring them and where they can make a difference. And there's so many companies out
mm-hmm.
there, not just in cannabis, but people are miserable in doing what they're doing on a day-to-day in their day-to-day lives. I mean, I got to tell you, I was miserable in the nursing home space. I got fired from the nursing home space, and it was like this huge amount of weight that went off my shoulders, and it allowed me, looking back at the time, it was very traumatic, but looking back, it allowed me to think differently and to say I can move in a totally new area. And so if I feel like if I take the time with people learning to do this industry and I can tap into their motivation, then if I have an opening down the road, I already know that person's committed, that person wants to do this for the right reasons, and that person could be a great fit for me and my organization down the road. I have a lot of people that I talk to, and I said, if you keep working with me and you keep following what I do on LinkedIn, and then when an opportunity comes up, then you would have the best ability to accept that opportunity if you wanted to, because then I don't have to train you. I don't have to sit there and explain to you everything. You already have a very good understanding of what you would be getting into. Because a lot of people I talk to about getting into the cannabis space, it's not a situation where you talk to them and go to lunch and they make a decision. It's a pretty big decision to leave banking or to leave healthcare. So if I can discuss it with you over months or a year, and then you're mentally ready, so then when I'm ready for that opportunity, it's a great fit and you're totally committed. And so any company in cannabis is only as good as their newest employee. And so you really have to build that culture in. And in the nursing home industry, I mean, if I can motivate people to work in the nursing home industry, I can definitely motivate people to work in the cannabis space.
Yeah. Oh, totally. I can imagine, for sure. Now, so speaking of that, where can our listeners find out more about the work that you're doing and keep up with what you're doing and potentially get into contact with you if they happen to be someone, like you said, who is contemplating leaving their banking job or their job in some other industry to get into this?
I think the best way is I'm always on LinkedIn. So just look me up, Michael Patterson, and then U.S. Cannabis Pharmaceutical Research and Development. I try to accept everybody who reaches out to my network. I'm around 26,000 followers right now. I find the larger numbers, the better, because I post a lot. I probably post 2 to 3 times a day. That's not the norm on LinkedIn, but I do that to educate. I try to give you as many rules and the laws, and then you can reach out, instant message me if you want to have a conversation. I just forewarn everybody. Typically, I like to do those conversations on Sundays so I can do my regular work during the week. So if you're interested in having that conversation, I'd be more than happy to talk to you, kind of give you the ins and outs. But the number one thing that I see from most people is they don't feel that they can provide value in the industry because they don't understand the industry. And so one of the number one things I tell them is you have a lot of value. We just need to figure out where we can put it in this space.
I love that, man. I love that. Yes, everyone certainly brings their own unique skill sets and perspective. And yeah, it's just a matter of finding where that puzzle piece can sort of fit into the grander picture of what we're all trying to achieve here, man. And I thank you again for the work that you're doing, both in this country and in Florida, as well as internationally, man. I am stoked to see where it all goes. And once the floodgates of legalization finally do open up, man, like I am super stoked to see what you guys are going to be up to over there.
And I hope to be working with tons of American companies when that does happen, so we can all benefit. So that's what I'm excited about is to bring opportunity to other American companies that probably don't even exist yet.
Ooh, I love that. The potential is just, it's ripe in the air, man. I can taste it.
Yeah, me too. Like when I talk to groups around the world, it's weird. I'm the only American on our team, and so it's just like you don't see this.
Crazy.
Why don't you see this? It's like we've been doing this forever over here. It's like let's get going. Yeah, totally understand it. Yeah.
Well, better late than never, man, for sure.
Right.
And thanks again for taking an hour out of your day, man, to have this conversation with me. I really, really appreciate it. And again, thank you so much for the work that you're doing. Keep up the good work. And please, please continue to stay safe over in Florida with the weather, with the pandemic, and with everything going on. The last time I checked, though, you guys aren't number one. We took the #1 spot for COVID cases, so you're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you. We'll try to beat you. Don't worry. Yeah. We're going to keep trying to beat you.
Okay, right on. I'll keep you updated from the other side of the country, no doubt.
Sounds good.
Well, Michael Patterson, man, thank you again so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it, and I hope that we can talk again soon, hopefully maybe in person sometime.
I would love that.
Cool. Let's make it happen. Right on, Michael. Thank you so much again, man. Take care, and I'll talk to you soon. My thanks again to Michael Patterson for joining me. If you are a member of the cannabis community and have a story you want to share with us, we would love to hear from you. You can reach the show at hashitout at TRICHOMES.com. You can help others find the show by taking a moment to subscribe to the podcast and write a review. You can also join the discussion with industry insiders and get your voice heard by joining the community at TRICHOMES.com and following us on all social media. Hash It Out is produced by David Fortin and presented by TRICHOMES.com. I'm RJ Balde. Thanks for listening.